started. Thanks for coming to our, I feel like the mic is just overkill. Okay, can everybody hear me? So we're going to get started. Thanks for coming to the second panel of this week. And this one is our Entrepreneurial Entrees. So we're focused more on the food industry and entrepreneurs and that come from Nate. So, the Mawji Center is really wanting to reach out to students in other disciplines, and that's really one of our key focuses, is knowing that you don't need to be in the school of business to own a business, that you could come from any of the schools and you'll need those skills to become an entrepreneur. So, I think that everyone I talked to at our opening event last night, what was interesting was they either started here in a certain faculty and then went off to a different stream, which is kind of what you did. So I'm really interested to hear your stories. But first, I'll introduce you to Linda. Linda is a past Nate grad. She could be on this panel. I'm reading her bio, and she has done quite a number of things, including having a cat festival, which is kind of entrepreneurial.
That is the highlight of my successes to date, I would say.
And Linda has also worked at Nate, and now she works at Calder Bateman, and she does a lot of moderating work around the food industry, so this is a passion of hers as well. So welcome, Linda, and I'll leave you to introduce our guests.
Perfect, thank you. So, our guest today is Sylvia Cheverie. Sylvia is a Nate marketing grad and owner of one of Canada's best restaurants, Chartier in Beaumont, which focuses on rustic French-Canadian cuisine. Chartier's story is unique in that it started through a successful crowdfunding campaign back in 2015. So it is the most successful restaurant Kickstarter campaign in Canada and was the first successful Kickstarter campaign for a restaurant in Alberta. And Sylvia also has experience media buying at Calder Bateman as well. Our other guest here is Kathy Leskow. Did I say that right? Perfect. Of Confetti Sweets. So she is a Nate business marketing grad and owner of Confetti Sweets Bakery, which has grown to multiple locations over the past few years. So she started selling her delicious cookies and other baked goods at markets. Then she had a full-fledged business in her basement, and now she has many storefronts and one opening in Windermere soon. Do we have an opening date?
Next summer.
Next summer in Windermere. In 2015, Kathy's cookies actually made their way to Hollywood, so they were included in pre-Oscars festivity gift bags for a lot of Hollywood actors, which is pretty cool. So thank you for coming, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
So, can we just start off by each of you telling the audience a bit about your businesses and how it started and why you wanted to start start Confetti Sweets and start Chartier? Let's start with Sylvia.
Chartier is actually my second business. After I left Calder Bateman, I had my daughter, Rowan, and ad life wasn't a great balance for me when I had my young family, so I decided to open my own marketing strategy firm called Silverbell Strategy. So that was my first kind of dive into entrepreneurship, where I was just working really casually part-time. And then after doing that for about 2 years, my husband and I came up with the idea to open a French restaurant in my hometown of Beaumont. We had recently moved back to Beaumont, that's where I was born and raised. My family has really, really deep roots there. We've been in the community for over 100 years. My dad's here. The house is now like 102 years old, right? We live in a house that's 102 years old that has seen many generations of Forster people live there. And so it was really important for us to build stronger roots in the community by opening a business there. So the idea came when my husband and I finally had a date night. My parents were watching Rowan, and we started driving to Beaumont because we live on a farm, and we got there and I was like, holy crap, like where are we going to eat right now? Boston Pizza? Yeah. Has anyone here been to Beaumont before? Yeah, so we have more pizza places per person than I swear any other place in Alberta. It's insane. So if you want pizza, Beaumont's the place to be. If you want anything else, like a glass of wine that doesn't come from a box, you're out of luck. And so, you know, we thought we can't be the only people that are looking for something like this. There was a huge gap in the market. And then we started to really dig into the demographics of Beaumont. The population had doubled in 10 years. And Beaumont actually has the second highest household income behind the Wood Buffalo region. So those were like two big indicators right off the giddy up that suggested to us that this is an idea that could work. And then we thought, let's test the idea with something more than like a quick little serving monkey or something like that. So that's when we decided to do the Kickstarter campaign, because we thought if people would be willing to invest in the idea, then they would be willing to actually come to the restaurant once it was open. So we used Kickstarter as kind of a testing ground to make sure that we legit weren't the only ones that didn't like boxed wine. And it turns out we were right, so it's good.
Wonderful. Kathy?
And my story kind of follows in a similar path in terms of I had my kids, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't want to go back to work full-time, so I decided just to start baking and selling at farmers markets, just to actually give me a chance to have scheduled time out of the house speaking to other adults instead of kids. And it just grew from there. We baked out of my home kitchen for the first couple of years. Then I actually built a bakery in my basement, health certified. I had staff working for me out of my house, half babysitters, half cookie makers, half market workers, just whatever worked for our family. And eventually we outgrew the house and were asked by the county to perhaps pursue a storefront location, which we did. And now we're up to 2 with a third on the way.
Wonderful. I imagine both of your stories or startup stories come with a bit of challenges. So could you share some of the challenges that you faced in starting your own businesses and just some of the risks and whether or not you think people need to be sort of risk inherent in order to jump into entrepreneurship or starting their own business? Can we start with you, Kathy?
Yeah, definitely you have to have a certain level of risk tolerancy, I guess. When I first started, I wasn't really risking much of anything. Actually, I remember calling my mom and saying, I'm gonna start this cookie business. I'm gonna sell at farmers markets, and there's really no risk involved, like maybe $1,000. And my mom, who's not very risky, is like, "You're risking $1,000 for this?" And I'm like, "It's only $1,000. What are you talking about?" But I started slowly, so I wasn't taking too many risks at the beginning. It was, I think, when we opened our first storefront, that to pull out that big loan from the bank and be like signing that 6-year lease, and is this actually going to work? And I'm putting my house on the line, really, my family on the line, and it all worked out in the end. But even now, as I'm growing the business, I'm still fighting with that risk. So, for example, we're opening our new store in Windermere, and they're behind on construction by about 6 months, and suddenly I'm getting cold feet, and I'm thinking, okay, is this actually the right move? And I kind of had a conversation with a friend about, you know, maybe it's too risky for me now, and they're like, that's your job, taking risks. So.
And would you say, I guess, the risk taking has paid off for you?
Yeah, so far so good. It's just making sure those risks are calculated, I guess.
Calculated.
Which I haven't always done. I followed my gut way too much.
It's a bit of a balance then.
Yeah.
As far as challenges go, definitely the financing side was the biggest challenge. After we were so successful with the restaurant Kickstarter, we had $108,000 through that, and I was like, well, it'll be easy to get the rest now. Like, we're a proven model. This is going to work. But it turns out that banks don't love restaurants very much. There's a stat in restaurants, I don't know if you know this stat, but 2/3 fail in the first year, and it turns out banks know that stat too, because
That's not a secret?
Oh, it's not a secret. I wish that it was, but they full on knew that. Most banks wouldn't even look at our business plan. As soon as they were very keen. You'd be like, oh, I'm starting a business. We're like, oh, really? What is it? We'd say restaurant, be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't say it for you. So that was our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
We did have the money from Kickstarter, but for the most part, banks only want to lend if it's a surefire thing, or they want to lend to people who already have money. So I think it was maybe 2 weeks after the Kickstarter campaign, after we'd started to look through our alternate lending models, because we had to sign our lease even before we had the rest of the money, because the building was starting to go up and they were starting to secure space. So before, we only had $108,000
Let's do it.
to build a $750,000 restaurant, and I was like, let's just do it. And then 2 weeks later, my poor dad can again attest to this. I was like, I could barely get out of bed. I was crying every day. I had no idea where the rest of the money was. I had promised people this beautiful restaurant in my hometown. They gave me their money. I was now liable for their money to make this dream come to life, and I was shitting my pants, for lack of a better word, about what I was gonna do. I had no idea. And thankfully, I have an incredible family, and my dad legit bet the farm on our idea and on our belief, and so he took a giant risk, bigger risk probably than I did, by believing in what we were doing. So he offered to back our loan, and it was actually ATB Financial. I am not sponsored by ATB. I'm going to say that off the bat.
They do very, no, I agree.
I've tried to get them to sponsor me, but they won't. But I'll still sing their praises. No bank would talk to us, but ATB actually approached us.
That's great.
And said, I wasn't even one of their customers. And they were like, how can we help? And I was like, it was amazing. So that was the biggest challenge. As far as taking risks, I mean, the whole thing is, every day is a giant risk.
Yeah.
The failure rate is huge. But my philosophy in marketing is the same thing that it is in restaurants, and that the biggest risk I can take is not taking any risks. Because in advertising, if you're constantly playing it safe and you're living in your comfort zone and you're doing things that feel naturally just so right, chances are you're not pushing far enough. And so every time that we feel that uneasy, risky feeling, it's kind of a good feeling now, and it's a little bit addictive, maybe too addictive, and we make mistakes for sure, but it's part of it.
That's great. Awesome. Both of you are NAIT grads. How would you say your NAIT education or formal education contributed to your business or where you are at and the decisions that you've made? Let's start with you.
Confidence building, for sure. I really felt really lost. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, so I was like, oh, I'll do business and just navigate it. And my very first advertising class and my very first PR class, I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. And it was like an aha moment. And actually, I had great teachers like Teresa who lined me up with my first job at Calder Bateman Communication. It was their support and their connections that really helped me get my foot in the door in that realm.
And for me, I think building a bakery and not having the bakery background was actually an advantage for me. So my business started out of the passion for marketing and creating, and it was really, that's what I wanted to do. I just needed a product, and I like to eat cookies, I like to bake cookies. So that's why I chose cookies. And in growing my business and going up against other bakeries that have that bakery background, I feel that having a business background actually helped us out, because my focus wasn't necessarily on being in the back of the kitchen and creating the product. It was more, how are we gonna grow the business side of it? How are we going to market this? And I hired people to do all the baking, and I don't even really go in the back anymore. I'm more just growing the business, and that's made us successful.
Great. On that note, what do each of you do to market your business? So, what's your strategy? What are the key things that you're focusing on? What role does social media play in marketing Confetti Sweets and Chartier?
So we're a business on a budget. We don't. I don't like to waste money. So I don't do a lot of. I don't do a ton of paid advertising. I do small amounts of print. We try and get as much free PR as we can, and that's essentially what we did when we went to the Oscars. We taking the cookies to the Oscars, and this is going to make a great news story. We don't care if we sell cookies to the people in Los Angeles. We care that the people of Edmonton and surrounding areas now know about Confetti Sweets and know that our cookies are of that high quality. So whatever free PR we can get, we really capitalize on that. And social media is huge. We have it might be small. I think it's big. We have about 10,000 followers on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we don't really push our products. We're not one of kind of like the fancy style bakery that just takes beautiful pictures of cookies, because cookies are fun and my staff is fun and our company's fun, and we really try and show off just the culture, I guess, of the business.
Great.
Yeah, so social media is really where it's at for the future.
So we very similar. We use social media a lot. I think in the entire time that we've been open, I've paid for 2 ads. One was in my daughter's dance recital book, and I wanted to be nice. And then the other one was when we won the best new restaurant in Avenue magazine. We just did like a little thank you to everybody who supported us. But other than that, we really feel that the best marketing dollars we can spend are in-house on our guest experience. I'd rather spend the $25 that it costs me for a bottle of wine and circulate the room with a bottle and glasses and drop them off at tables, and make personal connections with people instead of just paying thousands of dollars for an ad that maybe people see. Because in our industry, word of mouth is everything, right? It's all about people talk about their night out and they post about their night out, and it's a very engaging topic of conversation. So that's where we focus our marketing budget, and then I spend a lot of time on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well, just kind of constantly keeping us in the loop and keeping our people in the loop about what's happening and what we're doing and the exciting things that are happening in Beaumont as well.
Replying back to people,
Yeah,
making those engagements there. Can you just build on that? What does your day-to-day look like?
It's like, it varies so much. I feel like I'm better at my job marketing the business if I'm more involved in the day-to-day happenings on the floor. So I still run the floor, like as a manager, every Tuesday and Saturday. Just because I need to have that viewpoint. I need to hear what the guests are saying, what they like, what they don't like. Also, when Darren and I did the Kickstarter campaign, we very much sold ourselves. We weren't really
want to see you.
They want to see us, right? It's not a faceless company. People know that it's owned by Darren and Sylvia, and so it's important for us that they see us there. So we help out during lunch rushes as much as needed, but for the most part, my day is coming into the restaurant at maybe 9 after I drop my daughter off, and then catching up on the week. We meet once a week, like this morning, for example. We have every Thursday, it's called Meeting of the Minds, and we call it MOM for short. And so it's all of our managers, we sit down, we talk about all the profit, people, environment, product, and run through the challenges to make sure everybody's on the same page. So lots of meetings, we check in with our staff. We have 62 people that work for us right now. And so you're heavily involved in 62 people's lives, and managing those relationships and making sure that people feel heard out and taken care of, and etc. Takes up a huge bulk of our day. So a lot of it is people development, doing the marketing, planning out for future events. A lot more administration than I think I really anticipated. I really thought that I would just be out on the floor with a bottle of wine most days. It doesn't really roll out that way, but
Tuesdays and Saturdays.
You'll see me with wine, but
yes.
that's what it.
Kathy?
My week or my day-to-day is more just responding to emails, tons of emails, meeting with accountants, meeting with the banking side of it. The financial side is all me. Hiring new staff, motivating the staff, nitpicking the staff, tasting cookies, and just kind of peeking around every little corner and making sure things are up to my standards. I have an operations manager, so a lot of my time is spent mentoring her and ensuring that she's following my vision. And now with multiple stores, going back and forth to the stores a little bit more, that's eating up a little bit more of our time, and just trying to, we have this great culture in our first store in Sherwood Park, and trying to create that culture in the other stores is quite a bit more challenging than I thought. And I probably am in the bakery 7 days a week. I work a lot of evenings, days, but my time is what I make it. So with 3 kids, if I want to pick them up from school, I can zip out and do that. If they have a dance recital or whatever, I can zip out and do that. So although I'm working a lot of hours, it's on my own terms.
Perks of owning your own business. Could you share with the group any mistakes or regrets or things that you would do differently in hindsight when you were starting out, when you think back on it now? I'll start with you, Kathy.
So my biggest mistake all along has been focusing on sales and trying to sell more cookies as opposed to focusing on profits and the profitability of selling some of those cookies. So that's something, if I could go back, I would really kind of switch my mindset around and focus on the profitability of it more. When I first started, it was in the kind of the boom of oil and gas. My husband worked in oil and gas. We didn't care about if I was making money or not. It was more just, something for me, fun to do. And I wish I made a bit more money at the beginning, and also just looking into different opportunities better. I'm always focusing on growth and chasing the dream, and sometimes I don't always look at the number side of things before I make those decisions.
Okay.
For me, it would almost be a little bit of the opposite. I think at first I was a little bit too focused on the numbers and the profitability instead of focusing on the guest experience. And so I learned within the first year when you should spend money and when you should spend a lot of money and when you should spend no money. Because at first I was like, we can't spend, we have no money. Like, all of our money is tied up in this business. We cannot spend $1 more. But understanding that sometimes you have to spend a little bit more to make a lot more has been the biggest probably learning tip that I've had over the last little while.
You both mentioned that social media plays a fairly important role in your marketing. I'm just curious what your perspective is on dealing with negative reviews, if you have, for both of your businesses, and just, I guess, advice around that, and thoughts about how people should be factoring in social media and their approach to social media when they're starting their business.
No one's ever complained about a meal, so I don't know. I'm just kidding. People complain all the time. It's just a part of our business. Not all the time. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But it happens, right? Food is kind of like art, where it's very subjective. So if a guest says that something is too salty, I would never argue with the guest that something wasn't salty, because I might think it's great. We all have different palates. So there's some times where it's subjective that comes in. There's other times where we full on miss the mark. Like, we're human, we're not machines, we're not a chain. Our food does not come pre-packaged. We're not reheating frozen products made in an assembly line. So we make mistakes, and it does happen. But our approach to social media and those complaints and those issues that arise is transparency and honesty. Owning the mistake as much as possible. Whenever a guest will reach out to me directly by email, Facebook private message, I have this message that I always say first, which is, you had endless platforms where you could express this on. Thank you so much for coming to me directly. So acknowledging the guests and making them understand, like, look, you could have blasted this anywhere and you chose to come to us. You are an honorable stand-up person. I love you. Please keep coming. We rebook them in. We make sure their next experience is flawless. Because again, I would rather use my marketing dollars having that guest who's willing to tell us directly, come back in and fix it. Online, if there's an issue, I'm on my phone all the time trying to catch those things as soon as they come in, to make sure that we're staying ahead of it, and that we're not covering anything up. Our responses are posted publicly, and then when appropriate, we direct it. Listen, I'm so sorry this happened. Is there a number I can reach out to you to chat with you directly to get more information? I don't necessarily want them online flushing out every single detail. But 9 times out of 10, if Darren and I can get them on the phone and explain to them and come from a place of concern and wanting to learn and wanting to resolve, we're joking with them by the end of the call. I'll also say 9 times out of 10, my husband cries on the phone a little bit. He's a very emotional person and it feels really bad. like Darren is a super, you've probably witnessed this before. He's a very emotional guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, and so when we make a mistake, like he legit feels terrible. And so when that happens, then usually by the end of the conversation, the guest is apologizing to him for making him cry. So we love the chance to fix things, because if people are willing to come to you with feedback, good, bad, otherwise, you have to reward them for that. Trying to take you down and slander you is something different, but honest, genuine feedback is important.
Great. Kathy?
And my advice for negative online stuff is do not engage. So try and get them away from the public. Like you say, ask for their phone number. What number can I reach you at to chat about this privately? Because a lot of times it's not a winning battle. If they're genuine in their complaint, then yes, you apologize and you talk them out of it, and usually you're right, like they are correct, or at least if they don't like the cookie, they don't like the cookie. It is what it is, right? But sometimes you do get those people that just are out to get you, and those are the tough ones, because there's no winning those fights. So just try and get them offline and deal with it.
Wanted your take on kind of where the entrepreneurial scene is going here at Edmonton. So lots of new best restaurants making national lists, lots and lots of bakeries starting up. It seems like it's a very exciting time to be a restaurant owner and to just love to eat food in Edmonton. So what's your take on where you think this is taking the city, and whether or not we should expect to see more entrepreneurs getting out there in the restaurant, in the bakery business? Perspective on that. Sylvia?
I totally agree. I think that we're going to see more and more happening, and I think the biggest reason for that is that guests and customers and the general public is starting to care a lot more about where they're eating, where their food's coming from, and the community that they're supporting by investing those dollars, right? Like the recession was a really great time to open a restaurant. Just kidding, it was terrible. But it was a good learning tool, right? Because it's kind of like learning to play baseball by using a bowling ball. It's really heavy and it's really hard, but then all of a sudden you're jacked and you're ready to throw any kind of baseball that comes your way, right? But what the recession did, I think, is it made people think more carefully about where they were investing their dollars. They didn't have the chance to eat out 3 times a week. They had a chance to eat out once a week. And so if they invested in a local restaurant where they were supporting their neighbor, who was also supporting the farms in their area, they felt way better about that. So I think we're getting more independent restaurants. We're getting more of them succeeding and making national lists because the public is craving that, and they're starting to care more and be more aware and understand the impact that it can make if they spend their money on not necessarily the safe bet of Earl's or Joey's or Cactus Club, but instead investing in these small startups.
There's an appetite for that. There's an
Appetite. This is why she's a moderator.
Kathy?
And I'm going to come at it from a different point of view. I'm on the Alberta Farmers Market Association board, and that's where I started, and we still do a lot there. And we're seeing a lot of new entrepreneurs, kind of the young generation, the hip crowd, creating new foods, new baked goods, new ethnic foods, different things that people have not seen in the farmers markets in the past. So it's not your grandma's market anymore. It's kind of these new entrepreneurs coming up with new ideas. Their booths are exciting. They kind of have that merchandising background a little bit more, I feel, and that's really exciting. And a lot of these businesses are taking it to the next level. A lot of them are opening their own storefronts or restaurants, and I think the farmers market's a really great place to test a product. So what's going to sell, what's not going to sell, what people will actually pay for things as opposed to what they're going to cost you to make.
Where do you see your own businesses headed? So where would you like to take it? You were saying you're all about growth, you're all about chasing those dreams. So what is that Confetti Sweets dream?
So we're exploring a different possibility now. It was focused on storefronts. And we still have that focus, and I still want to get into the Calgary market and see if I can succeed in another market where I haven't done so with such baby steps. But we want to explore grocery retail stores, so mass distribution of a artisan product. And I don't know if it's going to work, and our shelf life is our major issue right now, but it's something that I'm going to try, and if it works, it'll be great, and if it doesn't, then, well, lesson learned.
Took the risk.
Yeah.
Sylvia?
We waver with this a lot. We've had a lot of different opportunities present itself because we saw success early on. So we did have some developers from the city that actually approached us and said, hey, we have this new beautiful building. Can you come set up like Chartier Phase 2 in Edmonton? And we've declined because it's really important for us to nail down what we're doing at Chartier and in our own four walls as much as possible. Like, I want to maximize our revenue potential in that location 100%, and then when that happens, I'll be ready to do Phase 2. I can't imagine it being in the city, only because with restaurants, like, there's so many working cogs, and the thought of driving like 45 minutes to an hour every day to go back and forth between two locations would kind of makes me nervous. So I think we have a long ways to go before we hit that 100% opportunity within the four walls that we've created. I have started to do a little bit of marketing strategy on my own because Darren and our chef Steve get kind of mad at me sometimes because I feel sometimes like a greyhound on a racetrack where I'm just like ready for my next race. And they're like, whoa, slow down, like we can't, we're not ready yet.
Yeah.
So the great thing about doing some consulting work outside of the restaurant is it allows me to flex those muscles without exhausting my husband and my poor chef. So I would love the opportunity to work with other small business, especially small business in the food and beverage industry, to do a little bit more on that side.
Wonderful. I had a few more questions, but I did want to open it up to the crowd. Hopefully the group has questions that you want to ask. Yes.
So you mentioned that you have social media experience. How did that help you shape your funding campaign? Did that really help towards those campaigns and what you did to make that campaign a success?
For sure, yeah. So did everybody hear the question?
Maybe repeat it, yeah.
Okay, so the question was, how did social media play in with our crowdfunding success? Yeah, they were hand in hand, so one fueled the other and vice versa. So before we launched the Kickstarter campaign, we started a website, we launched our Facebook page, Twitter page, saying something's coming because we wanted the opportunity for people to start to follow us before we all of a sudden just had this 60-day campaign. In Beaumont in particular, I don't know if this happens in Edmonton, but there's 3 Facebook groups in Beaumont for like community members that represent the entire population of Beaumont. I'm not joking, there's 18,000 people on these Facebook groups and they ask questions all the time. Like if you want to know what time Walmart's open till, you don't Google it, you go onto Beaumont Talks and you're like, what time is Walmart open? And then 45 people give you 10 different times. And so we were able to use, we identified where our online community was. They were in those Facebook groups. So it allowed us to introduce the idea and answer questions about crowdfunding before we actually launched with the crowdfunding campaign.
So you educated your followers before you even
Precisely, which is why we went with Kickstarter instead of say Indiegogo, or at that time the ATV booster campaign or platform wasn't available, because people use the word crowdfunding and Kickstarter interchangeably. Crowdfunding is a funding model, Kickstarter is a platform that you can do crowdfunding on. But we thought Kickstarter has the most brand recognition, so we'll use Kickstarter. And then even then, once we started telling people, oh, we'll be launching our Kickstarter campaign soon, people from the community had no idea what that meant. It's pretty new to Canada, and especially new to Beaumont. People thought that we were going to take their money and buy ourselves a vacation home and like leave Dodge. So it took a lot to educate and to make people understand what we were doing. So then when we did come out with the Kickstarter campaign, we didn't spend 30 days of the 60-day campaign time explaining what it was. So that was a really great tool for us to educate on what we were doing. Then once the crowdfunding launched, people had accessibility to us through all these different mediums to share with their friends about what they just contributed to. So there was like an excitement point. It allowed us, every time that somebody contributed to our campaign, we would find a really funny way to thank them online. So we would spell people's names in ketchup and fries and then take pictures and post it on social media. You know that Alanis Morissette song, Thank You? We changed the words to thank all the backers that backed us that week. So social media gave us this platform to remind people that we were still around and make them feel like a part of something bigger. It really created that community for Chartier. People felt bought into it. So then later on, we already had, like, when you open a restaurant, usually you're waiting for people to find out who you are. This way we had a ton of people who knew who we were and were like excited that this was happening.
Great.
Just a little quick one.
Yeah.
Did you have rewards then for people? Like,
Yeah, totally.
and so on?
So that's how crowdfunding is kind of the basis. Instead of equity in the company, you get rewards once the business is up and running. So for $25, they got 2 appetizers. For $200, they got 3-course dinner for 2. And then we did one as a joke, which was for $5,000, they got naming rights to our house poutine.
But someone did buy that, didn't they?
In 3 days they bought it. We did it as a joke. We're like, oh, maybe this will get us some press. And then Roseno family, like, you know those Roseno trucks that you see everywhere? Grace and Carl Roseno bought it within 3 days. So
Really worked out. I thought I saw a hand over here, yeah.
It was actually right place, right time. So
Repeat the question,
it was
yeah.
about how did we get into the Oscars, involved with the Oscars. So the Canadian Country Music Awards were hosted in Edmonton for 2 years, and we just got a random phone call. They probably found us on Google saying, would you like to supply treats for the country music artists? And the first year I said no, I don't have time for that. Because I actually didn't. The next year we were in our storefront and I said, sure, we'll give it a try. It's a donation, you're giving your product for free. And I don't really like country music. I had a girl that worked for me that loved it. And I said, can you just do this delivery? Like, I don't know who these people are, I'm gonna look stupid, just go do it for me. And she went, and the people that were organizing the event were on the TV show Storage Wars, which she was also a big fan of. So she was like connecting with the organizers, connecting with the country music people, and they loved her. And they're from LA, and when they had an opportunity to do the Oscars, they thought of us first and called us up. So I say, had I actually delivered those cookies, none of that would have happened, because I'd be like, here's your cookies, thanks. Here's your free cookies, thanks.
Great. Any more questions?
What are your staff to want to promote your guys' businesses individually? Because being an entrepreneur, you're not always, you can be an entrepreneur, someone who's inside an organization helping a small business. So what are some of the things that people who are in small businesses can do to help your business?
that's a really good question. Because you don't want to be the only person that embodies your brand, right? We focus a lot at Chartier on training and development and staff knowledge and staff empowerment, because every single server, bartender, hostess, they have way more touch points to the guests than we do. So we have just little things, like we have a Facebook group called Chartier Talks. I'll deny you if you try and request access. It's just for our staff. And so whenever we have a new event or a funny story to share, or we want to poke jokes at somebody, we use Chartier Talks for all of that. My husband Darren, his forte is in building culture. He was with Cactus Club Cafe, and that was his kind of claim to fame at Cactus. And he's really embodied that within the restaurant as well. So we do, every time we have a new menu rollout, we do about a 5-hour training where they taste everything. We have glasses of wine together. We talk about the food, lots of different staff events. It's really important for us that they understand our business from the inside out and why we're doing what we're doing, so then they can feel like they're part of something better.
And my focus is on building the culture. I want my staff to be as passionate about cookies as I am, and as passionate about Confetti Sweets. So a lot of my daily time is spent just interacting with them and explaining, not do this, but this is why we do it, and this is why it's so important. And I think they're either in for the long haul and they really buy into the organization, or it's just a job to them and they don't last long. It scares me. The minimum wage rising really scares me, because we have young people working. A lot of them do make minimum wage. I always paid more than minimum wage before to compete with the other organizations trying to get the best people working for me, and now I'm not going to be able to pay that premium to get them. With this last increase, we raised our dozen cookie price by $1. I think most customers understand, and we'll probably have to do that at the next one too, just pass it on, unfortunately.
Mirror the same. That's the reality is that prices are going to go up. I think you're going to see that in anywhere that really uses minimum wage employees, because it's not just our staff that's going up. Like anywhere that we buy our food from, a lot of them are smaller farmers. They use minimum wage workers as well. So our cost of goods is going up, and then also our labor is going up. Our strategy in that, you'll see a lot of restaurants and a lot of different people in the food service industry are going towards more of a self-serve model in order to reduce the number of people that they need to have on. So you'll see a lot more counter service, a lot more quick service, a lot more of those self-checkouts. We decided to do the opposite of that. I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but everybody else is scaling back, so we thought we could stand out by holding firm, if not increasing the amount of guest service that we give. Because people have countless choices to go out to eat, and lots of people make great food, but training people to give great, impeccable service and make people feel warm and welcome and taken care of, I think that's a really great point of difference for us. So again, all of those dollars that we would normally spend on marketing and advertising, if we could reinvest those back into our staff, I think we'll be in a better place.
Yeah.
But if you never hear from me again,
Check
it's
back in
gonna
a year.
Yeah. Don't do this model until you check back a year from now.
Yes.
It's a bread bar that we've now called it. It started as the bread window. Yeah, so we had a window that looked into the kitchen of the restaurant, and after about a month of doing our own sourdough, our chef was like, we should just sell bread out of this window. We should open a bakery. Let's just start a bakery. Well, we've definitely toyed with that idea. And so the bread bar was kind of our way to open a bakery without having a whole second location, so we can still use our resources, because we do a lot of baking for the restaurant. We don't really buy any bread product except for gluten-free bread, because we have so much like flour everywhere, we can't. So the people used to sell bread out of the window, and then it got cold, and so we built kind of like a bakery in the front entrance. It's like this bar with bread baskets behind it and shelving, and every day we sell a different lineup of like donuts and pastries and sourdough and things like that.
Cookies?
Cookies, we dabble with the cookies, not nearly as much as you do. I bow down to the experts. I know when to outsource certain things. But everything that we do sell from there, we make in-house. And it's a really cool touch point. The reason we like that so much is that, especially during the recession, not everybody could afford to come out to eat all the time, but we still wanted them to have an access point and a touch point to come into the doors, see the restaurant, so then they think of us. So then when circumstances do change and they are able to come out for a nice meal, they think back to that positive experience at the bread window or the bread bar, and that's our way to kind of stay in their head. Because the best way to someone's heart is through their stomach, right? So that's our strategy.
Mr. Motto. Teresa?
Yeah, so that you're right. Turnover is a very real thing in the hospitality industry. When you contrast to other markets like Montreal, in Montreal you have career servers. That's a very normal thing. You'll have somebody who that's what they do while they raise their family. Edmonton, not so much. It's more of a stopgap while they're in school or in between jobs or as side money, and it's not necessarily things that people make a career out of. We're trying to change that, or at least hold on to them as much as possible in a few different ways. One of them, as Teresa touched on, is through mental health spending and awareness. It's a cause and a focus that's really near and dear to mine and Darren's heart. And so, for example, like with our managers, they're all entitled to a mental health spending account every month. They can use it on anything they want, psychologist, mentor, yoga, fitness, whatever their outlet is to support their mental health and well-being. We also are very aware that we cannot work people like dogs, especially in the kitchen. You probably have read a whole bunch of articles, especially recently, talking about some of the shit and abuse that people go through in hospitality, where you're working 60, 70 hours a week. We know that people will be better versions of themselves when they lead a balanced lifestyle. So we watch the amount of hours that people work really, really carefully. And then the third thing that we focus on is tip pooling. There's a really big discrepancy in our industry around how much front of house makes versus back of house. A server will go in, work 4 hours, and come out with $500, and somebody in the kitchen online, where it's like 1,000 degrees and super stressful, will walk out with like $20, $30. So we wanted to adjust that. So all of the tips that all of the servers, anyone makes, go into a big pool, and then we distribute those equally between all positions in the restaurant. Whether you're a hostess, a bartender, a server, a dishwasher, you're as equally involved in the overall guest experience as anyone else. Because it all counts. People don't just tip on service. People tip because of the food, because of how clean everything looked, because of the flow of the restaurant. So that's worked for us so far, and it's helped us retain some really good people.
So last question. I'm hoping that you can share with the students here your advice. So advice for a new grad going into the workforce. Maybe they're working for a business. Maybe they're curious about starting up their own business. What's one key piece of advice that you would share to hopefully give them some success? Start with you, Kathy.
Just jump in and do it. Yeah.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Sylvia.
Yeah, there's never going to be a right time. There's always going to be a reason not to do it. So sometimes, like Kathy said, you just have to jump in and do it. If you're planning on opening a restaurant specifically, I highly recommend that you've had restaurant experience. There's some industries where I think you could probably get away with, learning as you go. I would not recommend restaurants as one of them. There's about a 10% profit margin if you're running a super, super efficient restaurant. And so that doesn't give you a lot of margin for error. So if you think one day that might be something you're working towards, start washing dishes somewhere, start hostessing, start serving, start learning the operating mechanics of that industry so you can better identify issues and solve and contribute to the team.
Perfect. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming to this panel. Can everyone give them a big round of applause?
Here, I'll just grab this from you. Thank you. Thank you very much for moderating, and thank you so much for coming today and sharing your stories. I really enjoyed all the advice. Very insightful on what your business is and how your growth has been. And I love the fact that, again, doing what you're passionate about and following that. And your biggest piece of advice jump in, be the risk taker, and see where it takes you. So thank you very much on behalf of the Mawji Center and Nate, and thanks Linda, great moderating.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. We have another event tomorrow in the health sector. Hope you can all join us. And if you have any questions or want to give feedback, please do. Don't forget to